welcome back to the Stick 'em Up podcast. Brundy, how you doing?
Doing quite well today. Just kind of been a bit of a relaxing day, but good to always hop on here now after watching some football, and we can talk more hockey here.
All right. We got the Pacific Division today, our last division to do, right?
Yep. 4-4.
4-4. Do we want to just jump right into that with the who are we starting? Probably the Ducks.
Yeah. We'll start with the Ducks here. Just kind of looking over their roster here and kind of what there's not. I don't know. I'm gonna ask you first what you think.
There's
of the Ducks going into next season.
There's not an abundance to talk about right now. You know, they're just one of those teams in the middle of a rebuild. They got, looks like pretty much, they got all their picks in the next 3 years. They've also got Boston's second rounder this year, and then San Jose and Pittsburgh's third rounder this year. So got a couple extra picks there. As far as the team goes, though, definitely still in the rebuild, but they got a lot of exciting things to look forward to. You know, Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, Mason McTavish, all a year older. Leo Carlson coming in, signing his ELC this offseason. And they got a couple new names as well. You know, they got Alex Killorn coming in on a bit of a heavy contract, but that's what you pay for the UFAs, I suppose. They also got Radko Gudas coming in at $4 million a year. They got they're definitely going to be better than last year, but they're still pretty clearly nowhere near contending yet.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting points with Anaheim here. Just looking at the roster right now and all of that, the biggest thing I'm kind of noticing is that obviously Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, neither of them are have signed yet. They're still RFAs with the team, but there's been no contract agreements yet between the two sides. So that's kind of interesting to just keep an eye on as you know we get closer to the start of preseason and whatnot. Is you know when they're going to sign and when they do, what the contracts are kind of looking like for them.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't realize that's not next year. Their RFAs. That's like this
right
year,
now.
that's currently.
Yeah.
So they at the moment they don't have a contract.
Yeah, no,
Now,
and it's like obviously, you know, they're going to sign because what is it here? Anaheim's got about 16 and a half in cap space right now, so they've got the money to get these guys signed. So I don't think, you know, that's going to be an issue. Another thing that I do like that the Ducks did, and it was something I went, you know, back to last year, that I was very like, I strongly believed in it, and that's just so you know over the you know I mean for Corey Perry, you know he was gone at like quite a bit ago, but you know I think like just last year they lost. Well, I guess now not last season, but the season before. The Anaheim Ducks lost Ryan Getzlaf. It kind of came out of nowhere for them, and they never really, you know, had established like this next kind of leadership group after them. Like, you know, I know they got guys like Adam Henrique, who's, you know, I think one of the better guys you could have leading a team. But other than him, really, like they didn't really have a whole lot. So I do like adding guys like Alex Killorn and Radko Gudas to help kind of, you know, not be like the main guys in the room, but they're going to have a strong presence and they won't be afraid to speak up when needed for the team.
Yeah, that's what kind of contracts do you see coming out for Zegras and Drysdale? Because I definitely think they're going to try and lock Zegras up as long as they can. But I'm wondering if they're going to think about signing a bridge deal with Drysdale.
Yeah, it's so tough to tell now because we're in a different, era where kind of before it was like your young guys right out of their rookie deal. It's like, you want to try and lock them up, or at the bare minimum you do like a 1 year deal from there and then go from there. Uh, but now we're just kind of in an area where I think the teams want to lock their guys up long term, but the players are like, I mean, look at Austin Matthews. He just signed a couple shorter deals, and then he still resigns with the team. But when he signs his next contract, now he can get even more money there. I think you're probably right, though. I do think Zegras signs a long term deal. Maybe around 9 million or so is probably where he ends up if they do a long term deal. Yeah. And then with Drysdale, yeah, I see like a two. Almost you can make the argument for something kind of similar to maybe what Evan Bouchard's going to get. I think that's just kind of what young defensemen are getting now. He's 21 now. He's going to log a lot of minutes on their blue line next year. So I probably see a 2 or 3 year deal in it around like maybe the 2.5 range.
Yeah, I think he's gonna sign something like that. Yeah, I really didn't realize that they didn't have contracts. That's interesting that they spent so much money on some of the UFAs out there this year without those guys being locked up. They also have Ilya Lyubushkin. They didn't have him. Did they have him last year?
No, they traded for him from. I think they made a deal with Toronto at some point in the offseason. Or not Toronto, Buffalo. He was traded for like a 4th round pick or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just in Buffalo.
But yeah, I mean, and then
definitely helps with their depth on defense. Yeah. Having Gudas and Lyubushkin, just 2 extra guys that are probably ideally in your top 6, but can easily slot in on most teams somewhere in the top 4. That definitely helps their depth. Before it was really Drysdale, Cam Fowler, and whoever else they could find. Really, I guess they did have Klingberg last year.
Drysdale only played a couple. Like Drysdale didn't play much. He went down with that injury, so I think he only played like 9 games or something last year.
Oof.
So that made their defense even worse. And Klingberg was the year before, so they didn't even have, right? Or no, yeah, I guess they did, yeah.
Yeah, they
traded at the deadline. That's right. Yeah. But yeah, and so I mean, their forward group, they've got that young talent. I think their leadership has definitely grown because I think it was very bad last year, and I think that was very evident on the performance of the team. And then in net, they got John Gibson. I don't really know what's going on with him. There's rumors that he says he's never going to play with the Ducks again. They're saying he didn't. So he's been in trade rumors for a while. I think he's a serviceable goalie, but I mean, he hasn't put together a solid season the last couple years. So maybe a change of scenery could help him. But if he is in net for the Ducks this year, I think he can still seal him a couple games here and there. But in terms of the team in front of him, I could see why he would want out if that is the case.
Yeah, I think he's still one of the better starters in the league. I don't know if he's as elite as he once was, for sure. But I think the team in front of him, defensively especially, has just been so bad the last few years that it's kind of hard to gauge him at this point. But I think they're going to want to try and trade him as soon as possible if they can, because if he has another season, his trade value is only going to go down unless he really carries the team.
Yeah, they got to try and get the most for him.
Yeah.
if they're trading him, and so that would be now because, yeah, like you said, his trade value's probably going to go down if he plays a whole season with the Ducks again. So that's something to keep an eye on, though.
But
Out
yeah,
of Anaheim, along with the Zegras and Drysdale extensions, when those will happen.
yeah. What do you think about their captaincy? Do you think they're going to sign or appoint a captain at any point this year?
I'm not sure. I think it's such a tough, like, I guess maybe not tough, but like it's a big decision, right? Because it's kind of the next heir of the team now. They ran with Ryan Getzlaf for so long as their captain, and now he's gone. So kind of picking that next guy to take over. And we'll get more into Vancouver later when we cover them. But even like when Henrik Sedin retired, and it was now like a big thing of like who's going to be the next guy to take over in the footsteps of Henrik Sedin and lead this team, and it ended up being Bo Horvat. So it's tough with the Ducks. To me, I think a guy that makes the most sense if you're trying to like have that new era type thing, kind of similar to the Getzlaf situation, would be Troy Terry, I think. But there is other options. Like you could go with, Adam Henrique, a good veteran in the league. He's been with the team for all. The only issue is he is 33. He's only got 1 year left on his deal. So then it's like, do you name a guy captain, knowing that he might be gone in a year's time, or even maybe Cam Fowler on the back end. He's also a guy that's been there for a while with them.
Yeah, I often think that there's a really good chance that it'll be Cam Fowler. Really, I think it's probably going to go to Cam Fowler unless the team decides that they really want to they want that new Ryan Getzlaf guy and they want to start turning one of these young guys into that player. In which case, I think it could easily be a guy like Zegras. One, of course, once he signs a contract, and it would probably have to be a long-term one.
I don't see Zegras getting it. I think if they're doing that, I think they're going with someone like Troy Terry.
I think teams just it's it not always depends on how they are in the locker room, but just Zegras is the flashy guy. He was on the cover of the NHL game. He's got a lot of recognition around the league, and I just wonder if it would be one of those things where it'd be almost more of like a general manager or a president of hockey ops kind of making the decision, more so than the coach or the players.
See, so that's interesting because I've constantly gone back to this before, and even you just talking about, he's the young skilled guy, the flashiness, the cover of the games. He reminds me a lot of like a Patrick Kane. Just a phenomenal player, a great young player in the league. But I always just see it being like Kane never ended up getting that C. It was always, he was behind Taves, but he was like the duo with Taves type thing, which I think is what we might see with a Zegras and like a Troy Terry. I see if Troy Terry does if they go in that direction, I see Zegras kind of being like the Kane, and he's, he's still a well-known leader in that room, but he never got the opportunity to take over from the other guy.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of incredibly skilled players that never get a chance at the captaincy, or at the very least they don't get it for long. I mean, Bergeron was so good with the Bruins for how many years, and he only got the captaincy in 2020 because Chara was just captain forever in Boston.
Yeah.
So,
and now with Marchand's the guy to take over, it's very similar where, he finally gets to be captain, but it's only for 3 or 4 years maybe type of thing. Even same with Malkin with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so
like that's a guy that's should have a C on his jersey, but he's just behind Crosby, so he was never able to get it. So I think that's kind of what I think is going to happen, but Cam Fowler is also just a solid option for them.
Yeah, I can't believe Cam Fowler's only 31. I just feel like I've seen him be on the Ducks forever. Like, has he ever
Yeah.
played for another team?
No.
Yeah, like he's just been around there forever, and he's what has he got? He's got 3 more years on his deal, so it's not exactly a small contract remaining. But yeah, Troy Terry with his new contract, $7 million per year for another 7. I could definitely see that being the direction they go with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think is going to end up happening. I think Troy Terry will get it, but hey, anything can happen with Anaheim. Enough with the Duck. Oh, I guess we gotta.
Enough with it.
I guess before we move on, we have to keep on going with where we have each team projected to finish within the division at the end of this upcoming season.
All right, I'll start off with my prediction. I have the Anaheim Ducks placing 7th in the division.
I have the Anaheim Ducks finishing in 8th.
You do have them in 8th.
Oh, I have them in 7. I have them in 7.
He has them in 7.
Yeah, it's tough, but I have them in
the
7.
Playoffs.
Yes, obviously. Very far outside the playoffs. Still probably a bottom 5 team.
Yeah, pretty close, if not. I mean, like, all the teams that were bad in the East kind of took a step forward.
Except the Flyers.
Except for the Flyers.
They're the one exception, but they're like as deep into a rebuild as you can possibly be in.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad there. Like, it's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're 2 of their most exciting prospects are both being held up in Russia, so we'll see how either of those situations go.
Yeah. I think I just saw something. Actually, no, I'm not going to dive down that well with the Flyers because they're so bad.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in like 6 years when it's relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on, the Calgary Flames.
See.
Yay. See. All right, what are we thinking here? What are we thinking at looking at this team going into next year?
They're
very
a very
looking roster from a couple years ago. Just very different.
Yeah, they are so complicated. They're very similar to the Canucks in the way that it's so hard to tell year to year what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
My God, they don't have next year's first round pick for them, but they have Florida's. All these picks have little asterisks beside them, so they got conditions on like all of these.
Yeah, on the Flames, their own pick, 2024 and 2025, that was the Sean Monahan deal. So they'll keep one of the 2 picks, and whichever one they choose to send to Montreal, then they'll lose that one.
Right, man, that's rough. But yeah, so they've still got 1 first round pick. Either way for each of the next 3 years. They got Huberdeau locked up long term. They got Kadri locked up long term. Mangiapane has 2 years left. They're definitely hoping for a bounce back season from almost the whole team. But I think Huberdeau and Mangiapane are 2 of the biggest people outside of Jacob Markstrom that they're really needing a bounce back season from.
Yeah.
That forward core really top to bottom struggled last year.
Very heavily.
Yeah, it was just rough. Their defense still played decently well, and they've got a really good defensive core. Mackenzie Weegar, Noah Hannafin, Rasmus Anderson, Chris Tanev. That's a solid top 4. You don't really have that like number 1 like Conn Smythe level defenseman, but Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson, and Hannafin, all three of those guys are pretty high caliber defensemen. So when you
No,
have that
and
combination,
even Chris Tanev, when he's in his own end, is one of the hardest guys to go up against. So
yeah,
um,
yeah. Other if there wasn't Jacob Slavin in the league, I think people would talk about Chris Tanev as one of those guys that's always underrated because he doesn't have the flashy point totals, but he
yeah,
is insanely solid in his own end.
exactly, yeah. Um, the Flames are in a tough spot. I respect what Tree Living did. Basically how he kind of turned lemons into lemonade. You lose Kachuk and Goudreau, and you immediately turn that into Uyghur, Huberto, Kadri. So like I respect him for doing his best um to keep the team afloat and be like, we're not going down. We're gonna try and come back even better despite all this. It really didn't work out well last year. There was just so many holes with the team, so many problems. Uh, how much do we? We don't really know how much. Of an effect that was due to the issues with Daryl Sutter in the locker room and on the bench. That's going to be one thing to kind of focus on is there a different atmosphere or vibe kind of from the team? And then how do they play next year? That's also something that could definitely improve just due to something like a head coaching change. But they got a lot of work to do with this team.
Yeah, and realistically, like if some of these guys, like Mangiapane had like a 40-goal season, if he can be at that level, if Huberto can be at a 90+ point rate that we know he can play at, if Kadri steps up, if Lindholm steps back up, and then they get good goaltending, then I definitely think this team could get back into the playoffs as soon as this year. But they really just kind of got to turn back the clock and play like we know they can. I personally think Sutter was a very large amount of the problem, but
Just to clarify, Daryl Sutter,
Daryl
not
Sutter,
Chris Sutter.
no, Chris Sutter was the glue for this team last year.
He really was, honestly. He really was.
Honestly,
He
he's
was
like the best part of every
fantastic.
Flames game going to it. Like,
Oh yeah.
guy's incredible.
I think we
Electric.
saw when we were there, we saw like the best one of the year because it just took everyone by surprise, but like it was sick.
That was incredible. Do you want to tell that story?
I don't um so what was it was the Usher cam, I think is what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so basically just during the TV timeout, they're scraping the ice. They did an Usher cam, and so they just went around with the camera and uh you know, put it on Ushers and they just started dancing to whatever the song was. And then right near the end they turn the camera to an Usher and he's got his back turned and is like not wanting to participate in it. And everybody's like, why is this guy like not doing it? And all of a sudden, boom, he turns around and it's Chris Sutter there and the place just erupts and the music starts bumping. Like
That
it was crazy. It was so good though.
that night we saw Nikita Zadorov get a hat trick, and that was the second loudest that building got that night.
Yeah.
Dude,
Well,
people were so hyped for
Matthew
Chris.
Coronado and Dustin Wolf were making their NHL debuts, and I still think Chris Sutter got the biggest pop of the night. And like it was crazy. It was sick.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you think
but
they
yeah,
move Vladar for to make
you
room
have
for
to. You
Dustin
have to.
Wolf?
If I think they would much rather prefer to maybe move Markstrom, as opposed to Vladar, just due to the size of contracts, the ages, and all that. But like, I don't think Markstrom's movable. And you have to let Dustin Wolf play this year.
Yeah.
He's only got 1 year left on his deal, on his ELC, making league minimum pretty much. He's 22 years old now. So I mean, What
He's
is he
won
going to want us
AHL
to?
goalie of the year 2 years in a row now.
Yeah,
Hasn't
he's
he?
literally done
Like,
everything you can do in the AHL. Like he's completed it. There's no more side missions for him or anything. Like he needs to play in the NHL next year. I think it's better for him to come in and be a backup. Maybe play 20 to 25 games. Just kind of get his feet wet, get a little more accustomed to being in the NHL, and then I think the following year, um, I think is when he should be taking over as the starter, assuming he plays well the prior season. But I
yeah,
think that's when he should be the number one guy for the Flames for the next 10, 15 years for however long.
yeah.
But
And
I think
you know,
Vladar does get traded.
yeah, and if they trade Vladar and make the room for Wolf, honestly, I mean, if Markstrom plays similar to last year and Wolf plays to the potential he can, it could be as soon as November this year that he steals the starting spot. Like,
Very well could, yeah.
like if he says, "Put me in," and he's out there putting up a 910, and Markstrom's putting up another sub 900 year, what choice do you have other than to play the young kid?
Yeah. Yeah, they might get pushed into a corner where they got no choice but to let him take over. But I think the biggest thing with the Flames, they got to figure out what's going on with Noah Hannafin, Elias Lindholm, Michael Backlund. Like those are big
They got a
areas
lot
of
of big
concern. Like they got to figure that
UFAs.
out.
Yeah,
And it was very apparent, when Craig Conroy came in as GM in his first media appearance, he said, that situation that happened with Gaudreau, we're not going to let that happen again. That very severely, hurt the team. That's so much value lost, both just what you could have got back in a trade, if you're moving him, or just if he re-signed like he was open to prior, and that just his production that he put on the ice every year. But there's still, they're rolling into the season. They haven't moved any of them yet. It doesn't sound like anything's close on extensions. It doesn't really sound like. I mean, they say they're open to playing with the Flames and staying, but it's like they're not saying they want to be there.
the only
So
one I have heard that from is Elias Lindholm. I've heard he's a lot closer to re-signing than the others, and that he's actively said he wants to stay here. The other ones, really, it sounds like they're half in, half foot out the door.
I think Backlund's like he doesn't he wants out. Hannafin, I think just recently stuff came out about him. Just him saying how he didn't really want to talk about extensions or anything during the summer. Like he just wanted to train and focus and just spend time with family and whatnot. So I think maybe we might start to hear some over the coming weeks. Maybe if something starting to pick up with Hannafin, if he's kind of more open to re-signing now. So that's the one thing I'm kind of focusing on, is if there's anything that comes from that, or if there's still no talks between the two sides, then it's pretty apparent that nothing's going to get done. But those are three big players on your team that you don't really want to go into the season where, like you said, they're half in, half out. You want guys that are all in and committed to the team.
Yeah, and as good as Michael Backlund is for the locker room and everything, he's kind of the third man in that situation. Like Elias Lindholm is arguably their number one center. At the very worst, second center. He came second in Selke voting.
No,
2
he's
years
one.
ago.
Kadri's two.
Yeah,
but yeah, Backlund has kind of always been the the bridesmaid, never the bride type thing almost. He's just always kind of been in that. Sometimes he maybe bounced up to second line, but he's usually kind of there on the third line, and he's just never gotten
the guy. He's 34 at this point, so any extension would be years 35 and over.
Yeah.
Lindholm's 28. Hannafin is 26. Those are. I think it's pretty clear that if you get to pick two, you've got to pick Lindholm and Hannafin.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
try and get them to stay first.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really hope to see at the very least Elias Lindholm stick around. I think he's just been so good for the Flames, both offensively and defensively, and that would really hurt to lose that last guy that was on the line that had 40 goals each just 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, I think a big thing also that doesn't get talked about a lot with the Flames is like they did lose their top goal scorer from last year in Toffoli. He didn't want to be there, so he was the first kind of domino to fall. They moved him out pretty quickly. They got Sharangovich back. He's probably at best going to be a third liner. I really don't see him slotting into the Flames top six, and if he does, I don't see him being as effective as other guys could be. So that is a big hole. And that's, like, what did he have for goals last year? I'm going to look it up here quickly. I think he had around 40, didn't he?
It's not going to tell me that on
34.
Jeff.
So like 34 goals, 73 points. That's 34 goals and 73 points that you got to like.
You have to try and replace that.
Yeah, and Sharangovich isn't going to
make the playoffs.
Do that. Yeah, so I think it's going to come a lot from. I think especially it's got to come from bounce back years from Huberdeau and Mangiapane, but also some of their young guys like Jacob Pelletier, Adam Ruzicka, Matt Coronado, or maybe even some other guys that make the team out of camp. But
I know a lot of Flames fans that I know are really excited about Walker Duehr.
Yeah, I don't see him being like a top six guy though.
Yeah,
like I see him capping out on like the third line. Like I just don't see him being a guy that is a top contributor offensively for the team.
Right.
I think he's a great two-way guy though that should log a lot of minutes for the team on the penalty kill especially.
Yeah, and that'll be important for them because the penalty kill has been pretty good in Calgary the last couple of years. The one thing they've been able to consistently do is play good defense. So it was just unfortunate last year they had really bad goaltending, especially in the second half of the season after about January.
Yeah.
So if they can get some decent goaltending this year and keep up that defensive play, they might not have to score as many goals as people think to squeak into the playoffs.
Yeah. So I guess lastly, before we throw out where we think the Flames are going to end up at the end of the season, who do we think their next captain's going to be? Assuming they name one, which Craig Conroy has very heavily said that they will have a captain for this season.
If they re-sign Michael Backlund, I think it's going to be him.
I don't think you can now.
But that's even then that would be kind of a bridge captain because again he's 34. I definitely think one of the best options would be Rasmus Andersson.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards if it's not Rasmus Andersson, I see it being used kind of like what it was with Tkachuk, now similar with Lindholm. I think if they offer Lindholm whatever, say 7 or 8 year extension, and I think that comes with him being the next captain. I think with Backlund's age now, I mean so by the end of next season he's going to be 35. So again, it is kind of a bridge captain, but also at the same time, I think you want to give it to someone who wants to be there. I don't think you can give it to a guy who's just willing to stick around type of thing. I think you need to give it to someone who, loves the team, loves the city, wants to stay there, and has like no desire to leave, I think is what you got to do with this new kind of era of Flames hockey. I think they need to start off on the right foot. I think naming a captain is a big telling of what we're going to expect from this team.
Yeah, I think it definitely could be Lindholm. I think
Anderson's a good choice, though.
Yeah, I think Anderson or Lindholm would be great choices. And if Hanifin signs a long extension, I could definitely see it going to him as well. I think a lot of people kind of expect it to be Huberdeau, but
it can't.
I think people just realize that it's just he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who goes to a new team and just immediately gets it. He's incredibly good, but even a Patrick Kane going to the Rangers doesn't get that. You don't. The only guys you do that for are Crosby or something like that, right?
Yeah. I don't think you can do Huberdeau just because expectations were crazy high for him going last year just because of what he did the year previously with Florida. But I think coming in last year, the very clear issues between him and Sutter, like he came in and just started to really butt heads with Sutter when, I mean, prior to that, it sounded like things were awesome with him there. And then just a bad season all around for him, like just not what we expected from him. So, making $10.5 million now, he puts up numbers like that. It's starting to look like a bad contract. And so how do you give him the C now after underperforming? Because if you give him the C, you need him to be back up to like 90, 95 plus points. If you give him the C and he puts up a 50-point season or something, like now you've got to be like, do we keep running with him like this, hoping that things get better? Or do you have to strip him of the captaincy, which we've seen that happen multiple times with San Jose, and it's not a good sign when something like that has to happen.
Yeah, it's just it's a weird situation, but I'm surprised how many people seem to think that it's a foregone conclusion that he'll be the captain. But
if he had a good season last year, I think he's the slam dunk choice.
Yeah.
But after last season,
even if he did, I wouldn't expect it. Like I don't think we're in the era anymore of the best player is always the captain. I think it's
no, but I think he would because of his contract. I feel like because they know they've got him locked in long term. I just see him being their first choice as opposed to Kadri or Weegar. I think Huberdeau's just the guy that they would have loved to put this on, but I think they kind of realized that based after last year, like you can't.
Yeah.
But we will see what happens there. Do you want me to go first for where I have the Flames ranked?
Yeah, go for it.
I have the Flames in 4th in the Pacific Division, making the playoffs. They sneak into that first wild card spot.
I'm trying to think if I should shift anything around that I've got written down here, but I'm gonna stick with what I wrote down last time. I have the Calgary Flames in 6th in the division.
In 6, wow,
not making the playoffs.
So I struggled making mine. I ended up having the Flames in 4th, and then I'll get to them. But I've got Team X and Y in 5 and 6. I could realistically see any of those 3 teams interchanging. Like I think it's going to be
I imagine we have the same 4, 5, 6. If I had to guess.
Yeah, like it's going to be a dogfight between those teams. Like I could see it coming down to like, and spoiler alert, I have the team in 5th in the Pacific also making the playoffs. But I see like those 3 teams fighting it out for the playoffs, like right up till the end of the season. And I have Calgary just getting the edge because they'll probably win 1 extra game in a shootout because they won't be sending out Nick Ritchie when the season's on the line. So that's my That's
as if the
that's my
rest of the season
tiebreaker.
didn't go bad enough for Sutter to be criticized, like he had to make that decision. Like,
Yeah.
oof.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That's a tough one.
There was a lot of good players that had not shot yet too. I'm pretty sure Toffoli hadn't shot yet.
No. No, it was literally the third. He was the third shooter.
Like,
Like he
how
was
do you
in their
not put
top
your
three is
top goal
crazy.
scorer and point scorer out there?
Yeah, exactly, right? Um moving on, the Edmonton Oilers. Connor McDavid's team.
McDavid, Draisaitl, and the bots.
Yeah, pretty much. Dude, that's it. That should be a band name in Edmonton. That's sick. Um yeah, I mean, like we kind of know the story with the Oilers. McDavid and Draisaitl show for the most part. Maybe even the Bouchard show on the power play next year because he's going to put up almost all his points on the power play. That's Let's be realistic here. I think the Oilers are going to be good next year.
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting 150 points from one player, like it's hard not to be incredible. Like that their forward core is really starting to fill out. It really was just McDavid and Draisaitl for a while, but Hyman's doing pretty well. Evander Kane puts up really solid numbers when he's playing, but he's been injured quite a few times the past few years. Nugent Hopkins just put up 100 points, even if it was because of that power play one. Still putting up a lot of points for him. Ryan McLeod, Warren Fogle, even lower down guys like Dylan Holloway. They got some guys showing up.
Yeah, they really do. I really do like the look of their team. Like, obviously, McDavid is the number one player in the league. I think Draisaitl comes in at 2. But then yeah, like they just got a good supporting cast right now with guys like Hyman, Kane, Nugent Hopkins, even Connor Brown now. Um, he's coming in, probably going to slot in to their top 6. Probably going to start with McDavid, I bet. And like that's just those are the pieces that they didn't have for the longest time. It
Yeah.
was always just McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, and it was just kind of those 3 having to do all the work. And so now when you add pieces like Hyman, Kane, Brown, and even a prospect maybe like a Dylan Holloway or something, they're finally getting those supporting pieces around their star players. And then even on the back end, was just kind of Darnell Nurse for the longest time. Now you bring in Matthias Ekholm. You've got Evan Bouchard who's coming up. You bring in Brett Kulak, like good supporting pieces around, kind of your top guy. Not saying Darnell Nurse is the top guy, but he's treated like that kind of.
Yeah.
So, and then they even got good depth still. You've got Warren Fogle, Ryan McLeod, Matthias Janmark, Derek Ryan. Like they've just got good pieces all around. I think the only thing that again is kind of the biggest question mark with this team is the goaltending. Can Jack Campbell bounce back next year? Is Stuart Skinner going to impress like he did last year? Is he going to regress, or is he going to take that next step? There's a lot of pieces with the goaltending that is going to be a real big make or break for this team, because I just don't see their goal scoring and their defensive games to be much of an issue for them.
No, they definitely are deeper everywhere than they've ever been, like even in net. And I think Stuart Skinner is going to improve on last year. I think he's going to officially, well, he kind of already did last year, but he's going to really take the job from Jack Campbell. He's going to be their starter for sure. And yeah, honestly, I'm looking at this team and like I can see this team being etched into the cup. Like,
yeah,
this just seems. I'm just looking at their team, and
it
just seems like if you go back and you look at the St. Louis Blues, you go back and look at one of the Blackhawks rosters. This just has that feeling of it's got the top end talent on the defense and the forwards. It's got the good enough depth. It's got good enough goaltending, I could definitely see one of these next 2 or 3 years being Edmonton's year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very high on the Oilers this season. They're going to be a good team. One thing I'm going to ask you: if you're Oilers management and you could only have one of these two happen, would you rather have Jack Campbell to have a bounce back year and Stuart Skinner kind of maybe takes a step back, or would you rather have Jack Campbell stay the same or get worse, but see that next step from Stuart Skinner?
You want to see Stuart Skinner take that next step. I think, barring 2 years ago with Toronto, that insane October, November that Jack Campbell had, other than that, he hasn't seemed much more than an average goaltender in the league. He had an incredible stretch there, but that was really it. Stuart Skinner, like, last year was his rookie year, right? And he made it to the All-Star game. Like, if he can stay that level or get better, the guy's only 24. You've already got him signed for another 3 years, and I mean, well, that's the window with McDavid and Draisaitl right now, until they get extensions in place or something. I think you absolutely, you know what? If you just have to eat that $5 million on Jack Campbell, that sucks, but you're also getting $20 million worth of player out of one guy in McDavid. So yeah, I think that's best.
I agree with you. Them. I agree. I think you want to see Skinner take that next step. I've seen a lot of people saying that, you know, they got to ride with Campbell to start the season. He's got to be their guy. They've got to try and find a way to be able to move him. But I think we know the best that the Oilers are going to get from Jack Campbell, and it's not great. Whereas we've seen what you can get from Stuart Skinner. I think the only issue is come playoffs. I don't, you know, I think that might be an area where it hurts them regardless of who is in net. But I think you got to run with Stuart Skinner for this season.
Yeah, and I think at the start of the year, you probably go a 1A, 1B kind of situation, and you see, you know, can either of them really take the reins? But at the end of the day, it matters how much you're spending on your goaltending, not on each goalie. If you're getting good goaltending throughout the season and you're paying the $7.6 million that they're paying for goalies, that's a pretty good deal. Like, it doesn't matter if the guy getting paid less is doing most of the work. If your goalies are at a reasonable cap hit and you're getting the results, that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And they got a couple interesting names here on PTOs right now. Adam Erne has been great for Tampa Bay in the past, and more recently on Detroit. Sam Gagner, they're looking to bring him back, see if he can have another, what was it, a 7-goal game, a 6-goal game?
Yeah, I can't remember. I know it was 9 points.
And then Brandon Sutter as well. So they got.
Yeah, I'm really hoping Sutter makes a team. I really enjoy him as a player. I'd love to see him kind of a bounce back now after, you know, taking a couple years off there due to COVID. So we'll see what happens with him. But I do hope he is on the team come opening night.
Yeah, I'm liking the look of this team for sure.
All right. You want to go first here? I think we've probably got Oilers in the same spot.
Yeah. When we were reading our predictions in the last video, as we talked through it, I started doubting myself a bit on St. Louis, Minnesota, and Winnipeg's placements, but I kept them there. And even earlier, I was debating on Calgary's, but I kept them there. But I actually did just switch my 1 and my 2. I have the Edmonton Oilers now placing first in the Pacific.
Yeah, I had them first. I'm assuming we'll probably have the same. I'm assuming the rest of our list is probably going to go the same way.
Yeah, it's got to be at least similar.
Yeah. But yeah, I do have the Oilers in first. I just see them having a really dominant year.
Yeah.
Especially just, you know, when you got guys like McDavid and Draisaitl, it's hard to not have the Oilers finishing top of the division.
Yeah, and like, oh, man, every year I think McDavid's like peaked, and then he gets not only is he the top of the league, he gets even better. Like he might put up 160, 170 points next year. Like that's so crazy that that's even a conversation we can have.
Yeah, yeah, it really is, and I think it does a better chance, now that with Bouchard on the power play, like we saw just how deadly their power play was in the playoffs. If they can play like that all regular season on the power play, like I don't want to fathom the amount of points McDavid could put up.
Yeah, like if the scoring in the league keeps going up, he keeps getting better. If they can fill out the roster a little bit more, like it's wild to say, but like there's potential that he hits 200 points and he could challenge for Gretzky's single season points record. Like it's wild. Like I don't expect that, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
wild that we can have that conversation now. Like
yeah,
Kucherov's
that it can even be
128
mentioned.
points was the top best single point season in the league since 95. And then all of a sudden McDavid beat that by 20 plus points.
Yeah, he just keeps smashing his previous records. Like it's nuts what he's doing.
Yeah, he just put up 64 goals, and every time I watched him play, he looked like a pass first guy still. Like, I think at will, like if he just woke up and decided I'm gonna be a goal scorer, he could put up, he could get close to 80 goals in a season. Like,
Yeah, if that's all he tried to do is just score goals, like yeah, he could put up insane goal totals. But enough with the Oilers here. Do we want to? Yeah, let's move on to who's next here. The LA Kings.
the LA Kings.
The LA Kings. Todd McClellan's team. Great coach.
Oh, you big fan of Toddy?
Yeah, I do. I really do like him as a coach. I think he's done amazing stuff for the Kings, and I think he's going to continue for, I think, quite some time. I think he's probably got one of the safest positions out of any coach. Like, I don't see him being out of LA anytime soon.
Yeah, they've got a really good thing going in LA. They're missing a couple of their picks. You know, they're missing their fifth, their third, and their second rounder this current year. But they've got a really good core, especially of forwards coming up, and most of the important ones all look like they're locked up too. Like
Yeah, pretty much their big, their top guys are all, at least for the next 3 seasons, they've got everybody locked in.
Kopitar at 3 years. Dubois just signed his new 8-year deal. 6 years for Fiala, 4 for Deneau, 3 for Kempe. Like they've got some guys locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And Quinton Byfield has only 1 year left, but obviously he's an RFA. It'll be interesting to see what kind of contract he gets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more than I think, it'll just be kind of interesting to see where he slots in with the team. Playoffs last year, we saw him kind of move up and kind of be one of more of those go-to guys for the Kings. But now, Pierre-Luc Dubois also coming in. He's kind of similar to Byfield, a big, heavy player. So I don't know how much that affects Byfield. But like they got a good, they can roll out a good top 6.
Yeah, and they have a pretty decent decor as well. Drew Doughty is still putting up good numbers. Obviously not playing up to his cap hit, but he's still putting up pretty solid defensive metrics. They got their guy at the deadline last year in Gavrikov. You got Mikey Anderson. They got even young guys like Brant Clark. The only real issue I'm seeing here is in net.
Yeah.
And that really depends if they can just kind of find a goalie to ride with. I'm surprised that they gave up on their goalie so quickly last year. What was his
Cal
name?
Peterson?
Cal Peterson, yeah.
He had a big contract though.
It was it $5 million a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I I thought he was going to be a pretty good goalie in the league, and honestly, he was good for quite a while, and then he just had. It wasn't even that long of a stretch of being bad. It was just a like horrendous month and a half
Hmm.
of just straight up sub NHL goaltending, and
Yeah,
he just never really got a chance to come back because it was just that bad. And it's wild that they signed him to multiple years at $5 million a year, and they were
that
that
shows
quick
just how
to
good he was
move on
at the
from him.
time. Yeah.
I'm interested to see how he'll do this year. I think he's with Ottawa now, correct?
No, that's Corpusalo.
Oh, right.
Peterson went to Philadelphia, so he'll be
It'll
playing
be
back up behind Carter
tough
Hart.
to, yeah, tough to gauge with that.
Yeah, exactly right.
But you
Um,
know, Phoenix
I
Copley,
really
Cam
do like
Talbot,
this though. It's a
yeah,
solid tandem.
yeah. I mean,
I think
Cam
it's
Talbot's
got to be a
aging,
tandem.
but
Hmm.
36, you can still play 25 to 30 games. Phoenix Copley, I mean, he did really well last year, and that is 2,000 or 2.5 million for both your goalies. That's cheap. Like,
Yeah, not to mention they also do have David Riddick signed as well. So if you know all else fails with those other two, David Riddick can come out and he can be not a great guy, but he proved he can be solid when needed to sometimes. So there's multiple options for them.
yeah, and there's a lot of teams with three goalies right now that are going to have to put some guys on waivers or cut them. And there's probably going to be a couple guys that they're at least going to kick tires on
I think you
once
got to.
they're all free agents out there.
Yeah. But like we said, defense is pretty solid, and it's still got those high end guys like Drew Doughty. The forwards, I mean, Kopitar, Dubois, Fiala, Dano, Kempe, and then you throw in Quentin Byfield. I think that's a very solid top six, and that's not even including guys like Victor Arvidsson, Trevor Moore. What I think the biggest thing that is kind of going to be the focal point of the Kings throughout preseason and then the start of the season is what happens with Alex Turcotte. He was drafted in 2019, fifth overall. Really hasn't taken that next step into the NHL and playing like a fifth overall pick for the Kings. I do kind of see a window opening for him now that they moved out one of their good young players in Gabriel Velarde. They did get Dubois back in there, so it's not like a roster spot is necessarily opened, but it opens a possibility for Turcotte to come in and try and be what Gabriel Velarde was, coming as a young guy and really try and make an impact, because it's kind of now or never for him if he wants to take that next step into being the fifth overall pick that he was.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that trade ages as the year goes on because Dubois was a good get for them, but man, they paid a fairly steep price for him.
Yeah.
So because they traded both Iafallo and Velarde, right?
And Rasmus Kupari.
Yeah, those are three guys that I thought were going to be a decent part of their core going forward. So
I think a second.
yeah, like
No, second was part of trading away Cal Peterson. Never mind.
but if Dubois performs the way they're hoping he will, uh, not only will that trade look good for them, but that contract will look really good if he can
Yeah,
perform. Eight and a
and he's only
half, like
25, so
going forward, that's all his prime years.
yeah. Yeah, I think the Kings are going to have a good season this year. Again, much like the Oilers, the goaltending is kind of the biggest area of concern, but good teams and good GMs find a way to solve those issues. So,
Right? Where do you have LA finishing?
I have the LA Kings finishing third in the Pacific Division.
I also have the LA Kings finishing third, making the
I
playoffs.
figured. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a safe spot for them. I really, barring anything crazy, or if the goaltending situation gets worse before it gets better, I really don't see the Kings moving up out of that third spot or moving down and having someone overtake them. I think that's probably the most secure lock, I would say, out of any teams finishing in their division. I think it's such a lock that the Kings finish in third.
Yeah, I think they've done such a good job of turning this team from a bunch of aging out guys and moving out pretty much everyone except for Kopitar and Doughty, and kind of spinning this back and around, and now they're an exciting young team. They did a really good job of swapping over to being a younger team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, who do we got next?
We got the boys in teal, the San Jose Sharks.
You can't see it, but right now I'm doing the arms mouth.
Oh, okay, good. I'll quickly do it.
There it is.
Jaws. Oof. Fuck. It's a tough roster to look at. It's also tough looking at all that dead cap.
It's not too bad if you just sit here and look at the draft picks.
That is true.
There's a weird amount of missing draft picks in the third and fourth round, but
yeah,
they got their own first and Pittsburgh's first this year. They got their own second and the Devils' second this year, and I believe that's the one where if the Devils make the conference finals, then it moves into a first.
So I basically am viewing it as they have 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick. Like the Devils in no way, shape, form should not make the Eastern Conference final next year.
I think the East is such a bloodbath, and the playoffs can be so unpredictable. It's hard to know, but I would not put it past the Devils at all to go to at least the conference finals.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you view it that way, like, that's not bad. 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and probably a few more going to get added in because, kind of like what we talked about previously, I think guys like LeBanc, Hoffman, maybe Duclair, probably Lindblom gets moved, Barabanov, maybe. I think there's just a lot of more picks that are going to get brought in. I think that's kind of the way that the Sharks are taking this rebuild approach is rather than, I think kind of with the exception of top prospects like Henry Thrun was, like Mukhamadullin was, I see them just going out and bring in draft picks so then they can build their team from within. They can go out and get the guys that they want. And, they kind of know a lot more about those players because they've been scouting them all year. So I assume, when probably more of those guys than not get moved, I think it's going to be a lot of draft picks in this upcoming year or the following year being added in there. So I expect that number of draft picks to grow both in terms of quality and in quantity.
Yeah, they really just got to start stocking the shelves with as many good young prospects as they can. Yeah, there's. I don't know if we've looked at a team yet that has this many guys with 1 year left,
and they're like all UFAs.
That's
it's a lot of UFAs.
Like obviously they're like already kind of tearing it down a bit, but like they could really tear it down at the deadline if they wanted, and they could bring in as many first, second, third round picks as they want.
Which I think is what they're going to do. Because like I said, I think LeBanc, I think he gets moved. Granlund, they got in the Carlson trade. I think he stays the whole year and then is moved the following year. When he's only got 1 year left on his deal, I think Mike Hoffman gets moved. I think Duclair is kind of one of those guys. I think him and Barabanov are the two where it's, they'll play throughout the season. And I think the Sharks will kind of be in talks about them because, they're 28 and 29 years old, but they're both, Barabanov, you can get a solid 50 points out of him every year. Duclair, he's only a year removed from putting up 30 goals. So I think if you can get those guys coming back on decent contracts and not having to overpay for them or give them too much term, I could see those two being brought in. But even guys like Radim Šimić, Oscar Lindblom, maybe a Jacob McDonald, like I think there's a lot of pieces that are going to get moved out, either before or at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and it's really one of those situations where you just got to hope that they're going to make good on all those draft picks. At a certain point, it's draft picks. They have perceived value and how much you think a player is worth, but at the end of the day, the draft pick isn't worth anything if the guy doesn't make the NHL. And we've seen in the past, 5-ish years ago, Arizona's rebuilding and they're getting a bunch of first-round picks, and none of them ended up panning out, and then they kind of had nothing left, so they kind of had to start from scratch, and they're only finally starting to really build up the prospect pool after that. So hopefully they can hit on some more of those. They've already got, like you said, a couple of those good young guys coming up, Mook Madulin and the like.
Well, I'm also
it'll really be interesting to see if Zadina can prove himself this year.
Yeah.
Like, anybody who bets on themselves as hard as he did, with having a mutual contract buyout with the Red Wings, dude just gave up like around $5 million in guaranteed cash to bet on himself that he could get more by going to San Jose, which is, you don't see that very often. So I'm really pulling for him this year.
Well, and just before I hop into Zadina more, it's also worth noting that, a lot of people viewed it as, not last year, but the year before, that was kind of Mike Gur's first, draft with the team. And that was his way of kind of starting to get things rolling. But I really only view it as last year, just because the year before he was brought in, not long before the draft. It was a lot of Doug Wilson's, who actually, Doug Wilson also just signed in a management role with Pittsburgh. So he's going there with Carlson. So that's kind of cool. But when Mike Grier came in, it was a lot of Doug Wilson's guys still there. And so Mike Grier wasn't kind of there all season, going through the prospects with them and figuring out how they want to do it. Whereas, after the draft, a lot of guys were let go, and he brought in his group of guys that he wanted to work with. And so last year was kind of his first draft of being with the team for a full year, grabbing the draft picks he wants, being part of the scouting of players. And I think at the end of the draft last year, I think they received like a grade of an A or something, or an A-. So they did very well in the draft, and they got a lot of good pieces, both, early on in the first round to even guys down in the, the fourth and fifth round. So, I have faith in the group that San Jose's put together there for going out and drafting the right guys, and the guys that they can see being a part of this team in the future. But yeah, like you said with Zadina, it takes a lot to give up on all that to bet on yourself, and you kind of really got one crack at it here. But I see him probably slotting in high on the Sharks roster, just given the I don't really want to say lack of depth, because this is actually a pretty deep team. It's just there's not that high end stuff that every other team has, pretty much.
Yeah, it doesn't quite have the the superstars that a lot of other teams have around their top six. It's definitely got some skill there, especially Tomas Hertl and Logan Couture. But when you're reading off other teams and they got the McDavid, Draisaitl.
Okay, let's not go there. Like, that's,
yeah.
The Oilers are in their own area, but Yeah, no, that's exactly it. There's just not that very high level superstars there. Hopefully, maybe guys like, I mean, uh, William Eklund was a seventh overall pick. Zadina was a sixth overall pick. They're still young players. Maybe they come in, slop into the top six, and they can turn into superstars. Maybe something like what we've kind of seen happen with a Tage Thompson type thing. More for Zadina than Eklund, because Eklund is only 20. But
Yeah.
if Zadina could even be like half of what Tage Thompson has turned into with Buffalo, like that can be huge for the Sharks. So
Yeah, and
Zadina's kind of
honestly,
the biggest X factor, I think.
yeah, and honestly, they have kind of looked in Detroit like they don't really know. Like they almost just don't look like they know what they're doing, which is wild for a team with so many with such history, and there's surely no shortage of guys who'd want to go there, and they got Stevie Y and they got Derek Lalonde on the bench, so it's kind of
Mhm.
strange that they seem to not have too much of an identity right now, and it would be wild if they misused this guy and then he went somewhere else and did well, but I
Mhm.
could definitely see it happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, I mean, their goaltending is a tandem. Capo Cack and Mackenzie Blackwood. Both goalies that looked to have such a bright future, and they came in, and it just hasn't really panned out very well for either one of them. I think they're
Yeah.
going to be a tandem. I don't really see one being the go-to guy over the other, barring any injuries or major slumps for either of them.
Yeah, I thought, man, if you would have asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I definitely thought both these goalies would be on a much better career path than they are. Like,
Yeah, well, I would have expected
I
Kakkonen to
I thought
be the
Kakkonen
starter
was
for
going to be
Minnesota and
really
Blackwood to be the
good,
starter
and
for the Devils.
yeah, Blackwood especially. A lot of people talked about him like he was going to be like, you know, not quite elite, but one of those guys that's like, a high end starter that's border that's bordering on elite,
Yeah,
and it's a shame that it hasn't gotten to that point.
there is still time for them to turn it around. Might be tough with um, the defense in front of them. Mark-Edward Vlasic, we kind of know the story with him. Mario Ferraro, I think is their number one guy on the back end. I still think he's a very solid
Yeah.
defenseman. I hope he can kind of take that next step this season. Now that he's going to be in the role of kind of the go-to guy, and then you just got some good, filler pieces. I wouldn't say anything really standing out much in, Jan Bruda, uh, Nikolai Knyzhov, Matt Benning, uh, Shimmick, like Burrows. They got a lot of defensemen, like an alarming amount. So again, I think those guys are going to get moved, but like this team isn't anything out of this world. You can tell that this is a rebuilding team,
Yeah.
like heavy in the rebuild.
Yeah. But luckily, a lot of the things they're putting together seem to be on the similar timeline. You got in 2 years, Brent Burns' retained salary's gone, and in four, Carlson's is up. They got 4 years on Martin Jones' buyout. They got is it four? They got 3 years on the Vlasic contract, and they've got 4 years on the Couture contract, which out of all of those, the Couture contract is the only one I would say, that one's fine still. I think, in the
It's
last,
fine if they're in the playoffs because that's where you get your real value out of them.
yeah, he is a animal in the playoffs. And those last 2 years of the contract might look a little rough, but, with all that money coming off the books in the years, the next 2, 3, and 4 years, uh, it'll be a nice bit of extra cap room for all these young guys when you need to sign Eklund to a real contract and everything. So
Yeah,
they've got their timeline laid out clearly, which is can't be said for every rebuilding team. So
yeah, and I think I think kind of the area where they're really coming strong out of the rebuild, I think, is in 3 years' time. I think that's when you're gonna know what you've got in guys like um, Philip Beestead, probably Thomas Bordeleau, Willie Mecklin, maybe Philip Zadina, but then you've got those other guys coming up like the Muka Madulans, the Will Smiths, the Quentin Musty. So there's a good. They've got a good crop of prospects that are going to be coming up right when guys like Eklund and those guys have now established themselves either as major players for the Sharks or maybe somewhere else. But they've already kind of got that next prospect group to come in now, and now if they can keep kind of adding to that and have a good flow coming out of this rebuild, when, like you said, kind of when these contracts are expiring or the retained money is off the books, I think is really when they're gonna hit their stride again.
Yeah, like if even 50% of the guys you just named hit on those players being what you want them to be, and then you've got 3 first-round picks this year, like you could really see the foundation starting to build there of a really good team.
And not only that, like probably 2 mid to later first round picks, but like the Sharks' first round pick, I mean, realistically, it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 is probably where it kind of ends up. So, to have that prospect group they have already, and then you've got those other first round picks, and if you've got like a top 3 pick, like your prospect pool is going to be looking really, really nice.
Yeah, that could be a potentially really high pick, as high as number 1. And for my money, I hope that the Sharks get number 1 next year.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Because like realistically, playoffs aren't an option. I think the biggest thing is finding out just what you have in those guys like Philip Zadina, even kind of Fabian Zetterlund, Willie Mecklin, Thomas Bordeleau. I think that's kind of the biggest thing for them is establishing what you've got in these guys, so you know what to go out and get, to what to kind of build around those guys if you see them being on the team long term and where they'll kind of slot in.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think there's much debating here. I'm assuming you have them where I have them. I have the Sharks finishing 8th in the Pacific.
I also have them finishing in 8th.
Why?
Outside of the
Why would
playoff.
you do that? Why would you don't have to say that. Draft lottery team is what we're saying.
Yes, lottery kings. Draft kings.
Yeah. What do we got next? All right. The Seattle Kraken.
Let's get cracking.
Let's get cracking with the Kraken. Good team. Good depth. Brought in some good pieces this offseason. Locked in some of their good pieces long-term this offseason. I like the look of this team. I really like how deep this team is. I like that they have the mindset of, them being like, we know that we've don't got the McDavids and the Draisaitl's and whatnot, but what
we've
really got is we've got
as a committee.
They play as every player is our best player type of thing. Like we're all one together, and they go out there and they can just roll very similar to the Islanders almost. They can just roll 4 lines, 3 defensive pairings, and it's done by committee, and it works so effectively for them because everybody has their role in what they bring to the team.
Yeah, and it almost kind of reflects that as well in the fact that they have 4 assistants and no captain.
Yeah, I think they will have a captain next season. I think now that they're at a point where it's like, okay, we're no longer like, I mean, they're still the newest team, but they're not like, oh, we're fresh in the league now. We're still trying to find ourselves. It's like, you guys have made the playoffs. You just upset the defending cup champs in the first round. I think it's at a point now where like they're a playoff team. They know they can get there. They're gonna go back there. And I think you kind of need that identity and that captain there.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty solid 3, maybe 4 options for that captain.
All right, who do you got?
I think there is a very solid argument for any of Jordan Eberle, Yanni Gourde, or Jared McCann.
Okay.
I think any of those 3 could realistically be named captain at any point here. But if they want to go this route, because some teams just like doing it, they could give it to Matty Beniers and give it to the young guy, the guy who's supposed to be really good, the young center, and he could be your Ryan Getzlaf type, your Steven Stamkos for the next 15 to 20 years if things go your way.
Crosby, yeah, with how good this kid is. Yeah, I think that is. I don't see it being Jared McCann. I think he's he's an option, but I think when you're comparing to the likes of Matty Beniers, Yanni Gourde, or Jordan Eberle, my money would be more on Yanni Gourde or Matty Beniers just because, again, Jordan Eberle is 33. The end of next season, he's going to be 34. He's only got 1 year left. I really do believe that they go Matty Beniers solely on the fact that after the expansion draft, and they already had their guys like Jared McCann that they got in it, Yanni Gourde, Jordan Eberle, even guys like Adam Larson. But they went with Mark Giordano, who was a good choice. But you gave your captaincy to an old veteran who you clearly know isn't going to be on the team long. He didn't even play a full season there. He was traded at the deadline to the Maple Leafs. So it's like, why would you name your first captain in franchise history be a guy that's only going to be there for 7 months? And so I think a big part of that was it was just kind of like, even though they didn't need to, like, you could have done what Vegas did and just went a couple years without having a captain till you've really got your guy. But I think they kind of did that to just kind of bridge the gap until Matty Beniers has come in and is ready to take that role. So my money would be on it being Matty Beniers, but if not, I think it goes to Yanni Gourde.
Yeah, I'm pretty much at the same spot. I think those are the 1 and 2 choices, and I'd be fine with either of those. Gourde is an absolute heart and soul guy. Like, that's exactly what you want in a captain. He will go in and fight for any guy on the ice if he goes down or anything. He'll get in there. He'll be a bit of a piece of shit to the other team. He's just such a good guy to have on your team. But a guy the caliber of Matty Beniers, you absolutely can't go wrong with trying to also put your team behind him.
Yeah, and I think they also just want to go down the road of he was our very first draft pick ever, second overall, and I think they kind of want to make him the face of that franchise for the next 15, 20 years. But I think regardless, at the end of the day, with this team, from what we've already seen, I think they all have the belief that it doesn't matter, who has the C on their jersey. They're all captains kind of on that team. As cliche as that sounds, like that's kind of the identity they have, where it's not just one guy, it's all of them. So, but aside from that, like, it's such a deep forward core. Again, doesn't have that superstar high end skill, but it is so deep top to bottom. And you could even see, Matty Beniers take that next step and become that superstar. Eli Tolvanen, even Jared McCann could get that status if he drops another 40 goals. And then their defense, I mean, Vince Dunn, Alexiak, Adam Larson, Brian Dumoulin, Justin Schultz. Like, it's
Adam Larson.
It's not
put up the best years of his career so far in Seattle. Vince Dunn's taking a next step. Like, they're looking real good.
It's deep, and then their goaltending is deep. I mean, Even their forwards. He's on IR, so I didn't see him here. Andre Burakovsky, but like their goaltending, Philip Grubauer, Chris Drieger, Joey Decord, like their goaltending is deep too.
Yeah, it's a very solid team, and they play a very fun style of hockey of just
Yeah,
wearing down their opponent. It's almost like they play playoff hockey in the regular season. They just roll the four lines and they just throw people at you and they just wear you down, and then they go in and go for it. Like,
and when even Shane Wright, like he could still make the team, and I think they're hoping to get that next step from him, and he could be a huge impact player for them. So I mean, they have a good team. They have a good team, and I really like the way that it's built and the style that they have there. Um, Dave Hackstall, I think, was just signed to an extension, so he's going to continue to be the coach there. I think he's done amazing things for that team. So, and they just had a really good draft last year as well. I think they had one of the better drafts in the league. So, like, buckle up because I think Seattle is going to be a force for the next little bit.
yeah, and I feel like I saw it a lot more towards the start of last year, but a lot of people, as soon as Shane Wright fell in the draft, I feel like a lot of people expected less of him, but like, make no mistake, this is a first overall caliber player. Like,
Yeah,
people were thinking for a long time he was going to go first. Like, Slavkovsky is not going to be the better player now automatically because Montreal went with him. Like, they liked what they saw in him better, but Shane Wright still has the goods to be a number one center in the league, and maybe he'll be a Malkin-esque second center behind Matty Beniers, or maybe he learns to play the wing. But I definitely
yeah,
think Shane Wright's he's maybe not as soon as this year, but eventually I think he's gonna show up, but he's gonna show up in a big way in the NHL.
yeah. I completely agree. All right. That all being said, where do you actually? I'll go first for this one.
All right.
I have the Seattle Kraken finishing 5th in the Pacific Division and making the playoffs
Ooh. I have
because I do have them
Seattle.
in that 5th or that second wild card spot.
Yeah, I have Seattle finishing 4th in the Pacific in a playoff spot.
Oh, okay. All right. So pretty
Yeah,
close, pretty close.
yeah. I figured we'd have the same 4, 5, and 6. I'm
Yeah.
assuming your 4th and my 5th are probably the same team.
Yeah. No. No.
No.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
We got
yeah,
two teams left.
we do think that I mean, yeah, we both think that Seattle's gonna make the playoffs. I think they should, especially in this division. Um, I mean, the team we're moving on to, the Canucks, is the team I also have right in that area with the Flames and the Kraken, where I think the three of them can intertwine. Anyways, like lots of things can happen, but I do see Seattle being one of the two that come out on top and making the playoffs.
Yeah. Same here, except I just have them at the top of those three. I have them in the first wild card spot. They just they seem more certain of themselves, Vancouver, Calgary, they both seem pretty nervous, gripping their sticks pretty tight. They don't know where their team's going. Like, either of those teams in 2 years could be in a full rebuild, or they could
Well, we
be
know
serious contenders. Like,
we kind of have a direction somewhat on where the Canucks are going. Now, as we don't even have to, debate about it or anything because it's now happened. Quinn Hughes is now the captain of the Vancouver Canucks. As of 2 days ago or something, he was named captain. So that's a big statement by the team and a big decision that needed to be made. A lot of people are surprised it's not Elias Pettersson, but a lot of people can see why. I think everybody knows or knew that it wasn't going to be JT Miller. I think this is a good move by the Canucks, though.
Yeah, I've seen some transcripts from some interviews with both Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, and Quinn Hughes always kind of seemed like the guy who was like, yeah, if they want to give me the captaincy, that'd be pretty cool. And Elise Pettersson had been asked, have they offered you the C? Do you think you'd take it? He's kind of like, yeah, it would be an honor and everything, but I'm a fairly quiet guy in the locker room, and I don't know if that fits my personality that well. So seeing a lot of that is not incredibly shocking to me that they went with Quinn, especially
Yeah.
knowing their whole family. Like there is no shortage of feeling themselves in the Hughes family.
Yeah.
They've all got that hockey guy confidence, and you know what? That's it's you don't want to be foolhardy or anything, but you got to have confidence at that level. You can't be second guessing yourself at the top level of play.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I think Pettersson kind of made it clear, like without saying it, that it just basically kind of seemed like he didn't want to be captain. He just wants to focus on playing hockey and not all this other stuff because it just doesn't fit with who he is. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I said it before. I don't believe that Quinn Hughes getting the C is immediately going to make Pettersson now be like, okay, I don't want to resign here. Like, you guys looked me over and whatnot. Like, I think this is exactly what he wanted. So I think the door is still wide open for an extension. I think he gets it done at some point. But they kind of have their identity now in having Quinn Hughes be their captain for however long he wants to stay with the Canucks moving forward.
Yeah. What do you think if he were to sign tomorrow? What do you think an Elias Pettersson contract looks like?
Hold up, I gotta look up. I seen it comparable.
Stats? He's because he's currently making 7.35 mil, and clearly that's an underpay at this point. But
I probably because he just put up 103 points last year.
Yeah, while being pretty solid two-way.
I think at this point now, you're probably actually no, that's it. Never mind. I was gonna say he's a comparable to like a Jason Robertson, but yeah, Jason Robertson's on that steal of a deal. So a Pettersson, I probably, assuming it's an 8-year deal, I could see 8 years at maybe 10 and a half.
Yeah, that's about what I'm thinking.
10, I think that's probably where it ends up with him.
Probably 80 million, 8 by 10 is what I would expect. Mm-hmm. I could see it going up to 11 if he really squeezes them, maybe 11 and a half. But yeah, I think somewhere between 10 to 11, maybe 9.5 to 10 if he's feeling generous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he'll get paid pretty handsomely when he signs that contract. Yeah, and I think that'll still be a good deal for them. I think you gotta pay big bucks to get those superstars, those game-breaking talents, all locked up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even just the pieces around Pettersson, like JT Miller, I'm not sure what's going to happen with him, but he can still be a very effective player for them. Again, Brock Boeser, don't know what's going to happen with him. I'm assuming, now kind of with this new, I don't know, it kind of feels like it was almost certain he was going to be moved, but now it almost kind of looks like maybe he's going to be a part of their team moving forward. I think can still be a very effective player for them. Kuzmenko, great young player, expecting to kind of take that next step again next year, building on his 39 goal season. Sorry, because he put up 39 goals last year, which is crazy for a guy coming in his first year in the league.
Yeah, but then he was the one with the shooting percent, crazy shooting percentage, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
was
doesn't
like,
take a lot of shots, but like when he does, he scores.
yeah, he was like 29% or something like that. Like it was crazy.
Yeah, and even still good pieces like Connor Garland, Anthony Beauvillier, Nils Hoglander. Like they've still got, they've got that superstar talent. They've got like decent, okay depth. I think their depth is what hurts them more than anything.
Yeah,
Their defense, I mean, you got Quinn Hughes. Philip Pronik will finally get to hopefully play
I
a
think
lot
I
more for
think
the
that was a good
Canucks.
pickup. It was a little pricey paying a first when you're not a playoff team for him,
Hmm.
but I think that could definitely be worth it for them in the long run. I think he's going to be
Yeah,
a real good fit. That
he'll
Tyler
probably
Myers
run that
contract
second
is
power play.
that Tyler Myers contract's pretty rough, but it's only got the 1 year left. So as long as they don't trade for multiple 4 year long bad contracts to get rid of it, they
When
should be
I've
good.
also said, and I still believe it's going to happen at some point. At some point, once the Canucks have already had to pay Tyler Myers his bonuses, I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade where he goes to San Jose and Kevin LeBanc is included in the deal going to the Canucks. Maybe some other pieces added in, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see that happen. See the Canucks add LeBanc in with their forward core and remove Tyler Myers from their defense.
Who do you think? What do you think goes back towards San Jose? Do you think they're asking for a Jack Rathbone?
No, I really would kind of almost see it as a Tyler Myers 1-for-1 for LeBanc. Both guys kind of struggling on their teams, not the greatest contracts. Vancouver could use some help on, their second and third line. San Jose could use a right-handed defenseman. They can kind of log some minutes. So I kind of see it being maybe just a 1-for-1 swap for both sides.
That's fair.
And just to kind of help fill those areas that they need to fix for the time being, at least.
How long does Kevin LeBanc have left on his contract?
Just 1 year.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah, him and Myers are both the same 1 year.
I was curious if he had like 3 years left, and like what I like just said about not trading him for a guy who has multiple years on a not good contract.
No, yeah, like LeBanc. No, yeah, he's just got the 1 year left at like I think 4.75. So you're still saving a little bit of money.
You're saving a bit,
and then
yeah.
you're helping add to that forward depth that could use a little bit of help.
Right.
And then Thatcher Demko in net is a great. That's their strong suit, I would say. Really, right now is their goaltending. I think Demko is, when he's allowed to just play his game and he's not dealing with a bunch of 2-on-1s or breakaways and whatnot. I think he's a very solid goalie, and I think he's a very bright spot for the Canucks. At times last year when the team looked horrible, Demko was a bright spot for them. So I expect much of the same from him again.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it'll depend on their goaltending, just because it's not a great defense, and so that'll often mean that the goalie has to try and pick it up because of our lack of depth, and hopefully he can pull it together between that and their top six. But it's hard to say. They just need replacement level play from their depth on forwards and their depth on defense, and if their superstars can carry them, they could have a really great year. But if not, it could be another rough season for Canucks fans.
Yeah, they're in an interesting spot. So it'll be kind of again, like I'll spoiler alert right now because I kind of already said it earlier, but I do have the Canucks finishing in 6 outside the playoffs. I do see them right in there fighting up until the end with the Flames and the Kraken, but I see them just falling short. For whatever that may be, maybe someone just can't stay healthy this season, or they get off to a bad start, or whatever. I think they're just gonna come up short this year. But I expect strong seasons from a lot of their guys still.
Yeah, I think I have Vancouver finishing 5th just in the playoffs. So I had Seattle 4, Vancouver 5, and Calgary 6. Calgary being the one to not make the playoffs. I think very similar scenario. I think it's going to come right down to it. I think with a couple weeks out, Seattle's going to clinch a spot, and I think it's going to come right down to the wire between Vancouver and Calgary.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if Vancouver does sneak in there over one of those two other teams. I think they have all the talent there to get into the playoffs, not up there with the Kings and Oilers and whatnot. But I can still see them being a strong team to get into the playoffs, and maybe stir the pot a bit, maybe deliver an upset or two. It is possible.
Yeah, we've seen Thatcher Demko steal series before.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think that wraps up the Pacific Division, huh?
No, I think we got one more.
Do we?
Yeah.
Who's that?
We have a team that just only in April recalled to the NHL Jonas Rondbjerg.
Who's that?
The Vegas Golden Knights.
Oh, boo.
And that's what they're known for, by the way, recalling Rondbjerg, not winning the cup or anything.
Do we really okay, they won the cup, that's all they get.
Sick.
Tune in next week. I mean, again, the thing is, though, at least with Vegas, we don't have to talk about that long because they really haven't done anything.
That's true. I'm surprised.
They almost all their picks. Barbashev. They traded Riley Smith.
I thought they would have traded more of their picks. They're missing their 4th rounder from this year. They have Columbus's 7th. I think that was from Jonathan Quick.
Yeah, but they're
missing next year's 7th. Yeah,
their prospect pool right now isn't very strong.
True.
I guess. Oh yeah. Okay. So they let Brossoit go and Quick, but so now you've got their goaltending situation. So what happens? I don't know what's going on with Robin Lehner. I'm not sure if he's ever even going to play again.
Yeah, he at one point he entered the player assistance program, and then he had whatever injury he had. I think it was a knee injury.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Or maybe it was a back injury. It's really hard to say what he's gonna do. Okay, it was his hip.
Oh, and I know he wasn't happy with. I think Vegas. I think one of the things he said was they want him to just play through it, and then get surgery in the off season or something. And he didn't like that. But then you've still got now their Stanley Cup winning goalie Aiden Hill, but you've also got Logan Thompson, who was kind of his. He was kind of the starting goalie.
Yeah, it looked like it was his net,
and now he went down with that injury. Hill comes in and he wins a cup with them. So now it's assuming Robin Lehner doesn't come back, because I don't think he is. What goalie do you go with, or do you run a tandem? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to run a tandem. It's hard to say. It's really going to throw a wrench to their plans, I think, if Robin Lehner comes back. I think they're banking on him not, just because
I think so.
Now that they have Aiden Hill signed to a very similar contract as him, same duration, only $100,000 less per year. I think they're kind of planning on Lehner not coming back. So if he does, that might mess things up for him a bit. But, they still got the majority of their pieces from their very recent cup win this past summer. They still have Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, William Karlsson, all 3 of them for the next 3 years. Marchessault is at $5 million for 1 more year. So I assume they're probably just going to play let him play that out and see what he wants to do next offseason.
Yeah, and I think he'll want to re-sign there, and I think they'll want to get a deal done. I don't see him going anywhere.
I don't know if they can afford to keep him. I'm wondering if he's gonna price himself out a bit there.
Nah, because you got to also remember, like, Alec Martinez's contract is up next year, so that opens up just a little over $5 million right there.
Yeah, that's gonna open up a lot for him.
Will Carrier, I think he might get overtaken by some guys, and so there's another 1.4 that opens up. I think with a guy like him, especially because he's gonna be 33 at the end of next season, so it's probably only going to be something like maybe a little bit of a pay raise, and say, like, 3 or 4 years at $6 million or something, maybe something kind of similar to Alex Killorn's deal.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
But it'll be a little bit different with no Riley Smith. He was kind of one of those heart and soul guys right from the get-go for this team. He's now in Pittsburgh, so I don't think he's too upset. Join the likes of Crosby, Malkin, Carlson, Letang. I think he's going to be just fine there. But yeah, really it was, move out Riley Smith and basically just give all that money he was making to Ivan Barbashev, now signing that 5x5 deal with them. Other than that, it's pretty much that they're running back with the same group.
Yeah, and that anytime a team wins the cup and then runs back with a similar team, that's dangerous for the rest of the teams. So I
look at the Avs.
Yeah, I think they're gonna.
They kind of did that, and it worked out for the regular season, but not come playoffs.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how they do this next year. And they've got Ivan Barbashev for another 5 years.
Yeah, I think they're going to be just fine. I do have them finishing in second. I think as you do as well, based on process of elimination there.
Yeah, they were the team that I had in first originally, and then we talked over Edmonton's team, and just they've got more depth than they used to. So
yeah,
they have Vegas in second now.
Yeah,
making
I think
playoffs.
Yeah, I wish they would miss the playoffs.
Be kind of
fun. But yeah, I think they're gonna make it back there. I don't, and they got a couple guys that are like, UFAs at the end of the season, but I don't see any of them really being moved just because, again, they're going for the cup again. And when you're in an era or an era of Vegas hockey right now, where at least for this year, next year, rolling with the tandem of Adin Hill and Logan Thompson, and between the two of them, they're only getting paid just a little bit over $5.5 million per year. Like, I think you got to go all in and try to win at least one more cup in that 2-year window before, assuming one of them will probably leave because there'll be a proper starter and can get more money elsewhere, and then whichever one stays is going to get a pay increase. So I think they've kind of got a 2-year window to really go all in and try and at least get one more there.
And I'm surprised they really don't have 1 year. Like, a lot of teams will have a lot of their UFAs kind of coming up at around the same time. They've got them spread out pretty good over the next 5 years.
Yeah, they really do.
Like, there's quite a few expiring at the end of this year, but once you eliminate the guys who are making league minimum and guys who whether they are or not part of the team in the future, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah,
there's only 3 or 4. Like, it's a decently structured team, honestly, for how much people hate on them for just always going out and getting the shiny new toy and just going for the biggest person they can. Going out and getting Pietrangelo, going out and getting Jack Eichel, Mark Stone.
Yeah,
it's a decently structured roster.
Well, and even so, like I talked about the goalies, Shea Theodore is only making 5.2 for the next 2 years. He's going to get a big pay raise at the end of that contract. Zach Whitecloud's
Yeah.
still right now. He's signed for 5 years, but he's only making 2.75. Nick
That
Hague for the next 2 years is making just a little bit under 2.3. Like they've got
yeah.
just so many actually really good contracts right now that I think they need to capitalize on now before all these guys start, deserving more money on their next deals. And some of them will be pushed out of Vegas because there's just not enough room for them.
Yeah, like that White Cloud contract in particular, like that looks like it was signed in NHL 23.
Yeah,
Like
it really does.
low AAV for 5 years. Like that actually looks like somebody cheesed the system with that one in particular. But yeah, a lot of them are structured really well, so it's hard to see
Yeah.
this team drop too hard. But the Pacific is starting to heat up with a couple different teams. So
Yeah.
they might get knocked out a little earlier in the playoffs than some people think.
Yeah, I'll be honest, and it's not even because like I dislike Vegas. I don't see them. Um, I don't see them going back to back. I think it's so hard in the NHL to go back to back, which is why I think it speaks volumes to just how good and deep Tampa Bay's team was, and a lot of it also had to do with health. Tampa Bay was for the most part, at least in the playoffs, was able to remain healthy and. Um, and they kept that team together, and it had those great contracts and that great depth, but it was so good. Like I think with just Vegas, like I think especially with Mark Stone, like you know he goes out every year on LTIR. I think it's probably I still believe that there's got to be something to do with circumventing the cap. Just because it always happens every year right around the trade deadline. But then game one for the playoffs, he's back. But if his injury is pretty severe and gets even worse, that is a big part of their team that they can't afford to lose if they're trying to run it back again this year for another shot at the cup. And losing a guy like Riley Smith hurts. He was a big part of their success.
Yeah, those middle six depth guys, you lose enough of them and it can really start hurting you. Tampa Bay, they lose Andre Palat and then they lose Killorn, and those really stack up over a while and start affecting your production, especially if they're good defensive players as well. So
yeah,
they've staved off the majority of losses so far, but in the next few years they might lose a couple of those really big names like Shea Theodore.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our 2023-2024 preview for the Pacific Division. Just rolling back through the rankings I have for my teams here. I have the Oilers in first, the Golden Knights in second, the Kings in third, the Flames in four, making the playoffs, the Kraken in five, also making the playoffs, the Canucks in sixth, the Ducks in seventh, and the Sharks in eighth.
Yeah, and then for mine, I have Edmonton in first, Vegas in second, LA in third, Seattle in fourth, Vancouver in fifth, also making the playoffs, and then Calgary in sixth, not making the playoffs, Anaheim in seventh, and San Jose in eighth.
Boom. One last thing I think before we wrap up here, we did kind of talk about it. This team at the end of last episode, this was one of the topics. It has now been official, so it's just worth noting. Adam Lowry is officially the captain of the Winnipeg Jets now. That was my pick for who I thought they were going to give the C to. And I think that's very telling as well by giving him the C. A lot about their future. I think that probably means that, they know Mark Scheifele is gone, because I think that's kind of the guy that they would have went with if he was going to be sticking around long term. I think again, it's one of those things where he re-signs with the team. He gets to take over as the next captain because I mean, age isn't a factor because he's the exact same age as Adam Lowry. So I think that's very telling, though, that Mark Scheifele is gonna not be with the Jets for too much longer.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
But nonetheless, I think it's a great choice for the Jets going with Adam Lowry. He's just one of those heart and soul guys. You know, he's not the flashy superstar up front, but you know, he's one of those guys that will literally lay it all on the line with, you know, blocking shots, getting in those dirty areas, mixing it up. You know, he'll stand up for his teammates. He can still chip in offensively. Like he can go out there and do it all in all areas of the ice for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a great pick to be their new captain. And yeah, I definitely agree with Scheifele. I think it really says his days are numbered there.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, big decision there for the Jets. Big season coming up for them. But they're in a weak division, so they should be just fine, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean anyone could come in first in the Central.
Exactly right. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps this one up here. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Not really. I think we covered all the teams pretty extensively. I think we got it all out there.
Perfect. Well, we will. We've got these predictions that we've made now etched in here in time. It'll be fun to kind of come back on these at the end of the season and see what we thought and compare it to what we know then.
Maybe halfway through the season we'll come back and take a look at how they're doing or something like that, and then at the end of the year we'll take a look and see how radically wrong some of us were, or if maybe we were completely bang on. And we'll see how they went.
Perfect. Well, thank you to everybody for listening and who stuck around this long to make it to the end. So round of applause to you guys. Yeah, now it's time to figure out what we're going to talk about next time. We'll come back to you guys same time next week.